Welcome back to my channel, ladies. This is Katie, and if you're a high quality woman looking for a high quality man, then you've come to the right place. So today I wanted to do a very special video, something I wanted to talk about for a little while. It has recently come to my attention that as a high value woman, this is one of those skills which you absolutely need. And unfortunately, a lot of women are not doing this correctly. What am I talking about? I'm talking about how to set boundaries correctly and the subtle nuances of the differences between boundaries, standards, and rules. There are differences, okay? These three are different things, and I will be talking about that. Now, a lot of us, why this is very confusing for many of us women is because we use these words interchangeably a lot of times, and we're also confused what they actually mean. So that's why we're getting confused. When you're dating, a lot of times we have to communicate our standards, our expectations. And sometimes that's putting down boundaries and rules, right? Why this is important is that it shows men how we want to be treated. And that's, I think, the primary reason women communicate boundaries or set down boundaries, because we want men to respect us. We want him to understand that, okay, this is what we want. This is how he should treat us. There's women who set inappropriate boundaries, too many inappropriate boundaries that is just so high that it becomes detrimental, it becomes toxic to the point where you're actually scaring men away due to your high unrealistic boundaries, versus women with zero boundaries, zero standards, no rules at all. That's also bad. Okay, so you have to understand what your boundary standards and rules are, and also the slight nuance differences between them all, which I'll cover in this video. So let's first talk about boundaries. If you imagine you're in your house and there is a boundary line around your house, that could also be your fence line. It's very obvious and clear what a boundary is. So if someone was to step into your fence line or into your boundary and you didn't know them, they were a stranger, and they were yelling and screaming and cussing and acting inappropriately on your property, that would be a boundary violation. Obviously it would be, they're coming into your property and doing inappropriate things. At that point, you can tell that person to leave, or you're going to call the police. That would be appropriate boundary enforcement, okay, by communicating that boundary. That's pretty clear. Now, it works the same way when it comes to our emotional boundaries, our physical and emotional boundaries. So if a man was to physically hit us, okay, that would be a boundary violation. If he was to emotionally abuse us, call us names, okay, yell in our face, that kind of stuff, psychologically damaging things like that, that would also be an obvious boundary violation. Okay, that's pretty clear. Now, what is not a boundary violation? Here's where the line gets fuzzy. Okay, a lot of women want to say, if a man does something that makes her feel disrespected, a lot of us want to say that's a boundary violation. But I want to tell you that that is often not a boundary violation. So if a man, for example, you tell a man he's not allowed to not to contact you after 10, to not to contact you after 10, to not to treat you like you're just a booty call, and he continues to do that. A lot of us, we think that's a boundary. We're putting down a boundary, right? We're saying, you have to follow these my boundaries, right, to respect me. That is actually your rules. Okay, that's your rule book. A rule is a very specific set of behaviors that a man needs to do in order for you to feel a certain way. And a lot of us are using this wrong, because what we're doing is we're saying, okay, here's my boundaries, when it's really your rules, but it's like plop that rule book in front of him and say, okay, you need to follow these rules because they're my boundaries. Okay, you need to respect me because that's my boundaries. When it's not your boundaries, that's just your rules. Okay, very different things. He can do whatever he wants, even in a boundary violation. A man who is screaming and yelling in your face, he can continue to scream and yell, but you're just going to remove yourself. Okay, you're just going to remove yourself from that behavior. So boundaries are always to protect you, to show love and kindness and self-care. Okay, it's always for you, to protect you, to make you feel safe and comfortable. So if a man was yelling in your face, he can continue to yell and scream, but you're just going to remove yourself. A rule is different. A rule is he needs to do a very set, clear, very specific instructions of what he needs to do, how he needs to behave, so you can feel a certain way. Usually that's so you can feel better. Do X so I can feel Y, or stop doing X so I can stop feeling Y. Usually that's a rule. And you can tell it's a rule because rules tend to be more flexible. Okay, we give rules more flexibility, and 9 times out of 10, a guy's not going to follow your rules. So if you tell a guy, don't message me after 10, and he messages you after 10, most likely you're going to continue talking to him, but you're just going to be pissed that he messaged you after 10. Whereas a boundary violation is much, much more serious. If a man hit you or yelled in your face or cussed at you, that should be immediate red flag to stop talking to that person for good. Next him, that's a boundary violation. It's very serious. It should be taken seriously like that. Now, the other thing is standards. So standards is a little bit different from rules, because rules seems to be, what comes with rules is it tends to be very heightened emotionally. Okay, there tend to be a lot of emotions attached with rules, and we only really set a rule down when we're feel like we need to stand up for ourselves, or we feel annoyed, or we feel angry, or we feel disrespected. That's when we want to plop down a rule. Whereas a standard is often communicated very calmly, very calmly, and almost non-emotional. There's not much emotions to putting down a standard, right? So for example, if you want to date me, then you need to take me out on a date. That would be a standard. Okay, not emotional, it's just fact. Okay, you're telling a guy very clearly, this is what I expect. If you want to date me, this is what I expect. So standards are more about expectations. And a guy can do whatever he wants, but if he doesn't meet your standard, then you have the choice to next him as well. Okay, next him. I tell women all the time, have standards. Make sure you have standards, you know what your standards are, and if a guy isn't meeting your standard, you next him. That's how you communicate and show men that you're a high quality woman, you're a high value woman, because you have standards and you know how to communicate them elegantly. So boundaries are really serious, and if a man violates your boundaries within 90 days of dating him, you should next him immediately. No questions asked, non-negotiable, next him. Standards are just said very calmly. If you want to date me, you need to take me out on a date. Here's what I expect. Okay, very calm. And rules is the big culprit, which I feel most women need to drop. Most women are plopping down those rules left and right and setting unrealistic expectations on the man. Okay, these rules like don't message me after 10, don't take too long to respond back, clean up after yourself if you make a mess in the kitchen. Okay, you need to do X, Y, Z in order to respect me. Okay, very specific set of instructions that he needs to follow down to a T. Like he needs to take notes basically because it's so specific, right? That's rules. And usually those rules are said when we feel like we're vulnerable and weak and we need to put our foot down on something. And most of the time, you're gonna be disappointed if you set rules down. Men are not gonna follow your rules. One, because they're probably unrealistic. Two, they're just gonna do whatever they want anyway. Okay, you can't control him. Rules often are about control, about us feeling out of control and wanting to control him so we feel in control, which is really the big roundabout, hard way of going about gaining control. We can only control ourselves. We can't control him. So rules, I would just like you to stop using rules. Now, in terms of vocabulary and me saying rules, standards, and boundaries, yes, I tend to use all of them interchangeably as well, which is very confusing, I know. I think sometimes it just sounds like better if I say rules when I really mean standards. But really that's what I'm referring to, like the clear difference between the three. And there is one final mistake that women make, and that is, okay, imagine you're standing somewhere and there's a circle on the ground underneath you, right? And you're standing in the middle of the circle, and that circle could be your standard, okay? But a lot of times we plot down our standards or our rules like it's a boundary, like you can't violate this or else I'm going to be pissed, and we really put our foot down, but really it's probably a standard or a rule. We'll step out of our circle and then be super pissed at the guy for us stepping outside of our circle. So for example, if you set down these rules or boundaries and you tell a guy, okay, don't treat me like a booty call, don't message me after 10, I'm not that kind of girl. And then the next day, he hits you up and you decide to go over there. You find yourself over there at his apartment in his bed. Okay, and then you get annoyed because he's not treating you with respect. That is not his job to do. That is you stepping outside your boundaries or your standards, then blaming him for it, basically. Okay, he didn't force you out of your boundaries. He didn't have a gun to your head and say, okay, if you don't come over to my house, I'm going to kill you and your family. He didn't say that. Most men will not do that. They won't force you to do something. So don't make out like you're the victim when you're the one who is choosing to step out of your circle, outside of your boundaries, okay, outside of your standard. You're the one violating your own rules, okay, violating yourself. And that's where the major problem comes in. Women are the ones making it hard on themselves by setting down these rules that are first completely unrealistic. A man's not going to follow them. And often they're not following them themselves. So what is that teaching a man? It's teaching him your words coming out of your mouth mean absolute squat, means nothing. He's just going to ignore them. Okay? Every time you say one thing and do something else, a man's just not going to take you seriously. And you've trained him to do that. You train him, your words mean squat. And really, your action, he's going to be looking at your actions. And most men will just look at a woman's actions. If you start acting all crazy because you violated your own rules and then blamed him, he's going to turn around and be like, wow, you're crazy. He's going to next you. And, you know, that we have to look at that. We have to be honest with ourselves. So many of us do this because we're not taking responsibility for our actions. We're disempowering ourselves when we do something and blame someone else for our actions, for violating our own rules when it was never his job to hold us in our circle. It was our job to hold us in our circle, to maintain our standards, through our actions. So when it comes to setting a boundary, setting a standard, and I don't want to say rules though, I prefer you not to use rules, actions speak louder than words. Show him your boundaries, show him your standards, don't tell him. Okay, sending him, mounds of text with, here's what you should have done, here's what you didn't do right, here's how you disrespected me. Okay, and hoping he's gonna suddenly change his behavior, even though you're not being reasonable, nor, holding yourself accountable, is absolutely ridiculous. And men are not gonna take you seriously. They'll probably just laugh in your face because that's what's happening. And so we have to be aware of what we're doing. Aware when we are being completely incongruent and violating our own rules, our own standards and boundaries, and when we are blaming men, playing the victim card. Key takeaway, drop those rules. 9 times out of 10, you set that rule down, he's not going to follow it, and all that you'll be left with is one pissed off you. You're just going to be pissed. You just created it yourself. You set yourself up to be pissed, to be disappointed by putting that rule down to begin with without really thinking it through. Okay? So that's all from me this week. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like me, comment below, subscribe to my channel, hit the bell notification, be notified when new videos are released. I typically release videos once a week, and I'll be back with another insightful video next week. Bye.